This is a Sound Legacy production.
Well, hello and welcome to the Sound Legacy Podcast. My name's Andrew Couch. I'm your host. And this show is a Bay Area of San Francisco focused show where I want to meet my elders. I want to listen to great storytellers, and I want to celebrate people who are doing good in my community. And my guest today is a good intersection of all three of those things. She is, I think, accurately described as a serial entrepreneur. She's a luxury real estate developer and host of Ageless and Timeless. It is a podcast focused on longevity, well-being, and helping people live well at every age. Michele Hughes, thank you very much for coming down here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you. I want to know all about your background. I think what got you to where you are today, helping people do what you're doing.
Okay.
And I want to talk to you about the motivations. You know, why ageless? Why timeless? Why any of it? You know, you could be doing luxury real estate. You could be doing any number of things. You even talked about your corporate background. You don't have to be doing what you're doing. So that's what we're up to today.
You know, I think one thing that you just said, though, is really important is that you don't have to do anything in life.
Right.
If you really think about it. You should just decide, what is it that I'm passionate about? And if you can get that answer early on in life and know what your calling is, that's I think probably one of the key elements to a happy life, is to know why are you here? Right. What is your purpose? Yeah. What does God want you to accomplish in this world? And so I think I'm very blessed that I've had a few careers, but they've all been in their own way fulfilling. But then there would come a point where I would say, this isn't really where I want to go or want to keep going. It was good while it was there. So early on, I was a teacher. I graduated from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and then I got my master's degree at Hofstra because my husband was an attorney on Wall Street, so we moved to New York for 2 years. Two little kids from Boston who, had never been to the big city, and now we're living in New York and enjoying a little bit of financial success because we were just out of school. And anyway, so I took a job as a teacher in out on Long Island, and he was going to the city, and I was going to Long Island.
What were you teaching?
English.
Yeah. What age group?
High school.
Oh, wow.
Like a couple of them had held back a couple of years. A couple of them were like my age. I mean, they had been a little bit slow in getting through school. But most of them were the accelerated groups, and they were also New York. Usually the parents were from the city, had moved out to the island. There was a lot of level of intellectual stimulation and curiosity. It was a really neat place to start out from college or grad school. And so actually I was going to grad school. I'd finished teaching and I'd go out to further out on Herrick's High School was where I was teaching. And then I'd go out to where Hofstra is located, which is Hempstead. I think it's Hempstead. So I had a busy day, and then I would get home like at 6 o'clock, let's say 8 o'clock. My husband wasn't getting home till 11 or 12. So we started a marriage with, we had just been married, and we started it with basically two couples in that day and age, both with careers.
Yeah. What was your graduate degree?
So I started out in Spanish. And I do speak a little Spanish, but, I try not to brag about it because it's not all that good. But the more I use it, the better I am. So, I started in Spanish, and then I switched to English. And then I started to do the student teaching. And then I got my master's degree in English. So, that's another thing, liberal arts. I want to say this because I think it's really important, because today's world is all about technology, and I actually was asked by the University of Massachusetts to write a thesis on why is a liberal arts education important for future vocation. And that was not that easy as time went on, because more and more the way people were framing it was, oh no, just study computers.
Yeah, learn to code. Yeah.
There is nothing like a liberal arts education in communication and learning about the history of all these heroes in literature and heroines. And so I really think that having a liberal arts foundation, then applying, like if you go for an MBA or you go for a computer degree or whatever, that's because you're vocationally oriented that way.
Right, you've got a sensitivity to the poetry of human existence. You can appreciate great works of literature and
literature teaches you why people do the things they do.
Motivation.
And art, anything that's in the arts and communication field like that. So I really believe that I was guided right. Although as I got further along into business, I did get an MBA core curriculum at Golden Gate. I managed to get that somehow fit in, but I really wish, in hindsight, that I had just taken the 2 years right after I got out of grad school and got my master's degree, and just went and got an MBA. I didn't know I was going to end up as a businesswoman.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the twists and turns of life. You don't know what you're going to end up doing.
Well, that's the problem. Is early on in life, we don't know. I mean, it's like happy accidents that we ever end up doing something that we really love.
How'd you end up out here?
Well, I had an agreement with my husband because we were both from Boston, and the weather in Boston, as you know, in New England can be pretty challenging. And we had some friends that had moved to California, to Hollywood. One girl became an actress, and so anyway, they kept telling us, "You got to come to California." And so we chose northern versus southern because we liked the feeling more and the nature and all that. And so, ironically, no sooner did we get here in 1973,
wow,
50-something years ago. No sooner did we get here than I got recruited by Korn Ferry, which is one of the biggest executive search firms, and they were creating a women's search group to focus on finding executive women for business for their clients. Because at that time, and this was 1980, probably 1980 or so, at that time there was no real feeling about women being at the top. The feeling was that they were disenfranchised, and that there was no real place for women. So it was still an uphill journey. Right. So they wanted to create an opportunity for women to come in and be there at the forefront. You remember what's his name that was on All in the Family? I'll think of it.
Carol O'Connor.
We got Carol O'Connor.
Notes from the.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyway, so his wife was. With Korn Ferry, she was creating this whole profit center for them. And she was a friend of one of my friends up here, who was a human resources director. So he introduced us. And when I told them no, because I had just moved here, she was so mad at me. I started out with a real problem because she always got her way. And so anyway, I never went to LA for Korn Ferry, but I did end up, for the first 20 years of my life out here, I ended up being in the corporate world with one of the big 6 search firms called Ward Howell. And they hired, the reason I went with them over the other ones is Heidrick and Struggles, and there's about 6 of them that are really, really big and well-known, Korn Ferry being one. And they're all retained executive search, so you always had the upfront contract before you started, and they were all top management. So I was really lucky that I started with, such a prestigious group. And I went to Ward Howell because they offered me a chance to come in as a partner. And I thought, well, here's this little girl from Boston who's never had any real business background, and she's getting an opportunity to mix with the CEOs and the top management of some of the biggest companies and even entrepreneurial companies, because we were here in California, in the Bay Area. So I ended up having a 20-year run as a partner and director. I soon became a director. And I created my own little venture capital group because I was here with the high-tech world, and I thought, well, why not focus on what's right around us? And they didn't care that I was the only woman in the firm. most of these tech entrepreneurs, all they cared about is that you could get the right people for them. Because building the team, you could have a great idea, but if you don't have the team, so they really relied on the quality of the executive search consultant.
What do you think it is that you brought to the table? Why was it, why was it you?
I think the reason, I was told a few times, the reason they really liked me, one, I was very young for anyone in that business. Most of my partners were 20 years older than me. Two, I was very enthusiastic. And three, I asked a lot of good questions. I was very curious. And, sometimes what you don't know is actually an advantage because it makes you want to ask to learn. And so I was on a journey of growth and learning. And so they loved it that I was, open-ended enough to admit where I didn't know something, but be very articulate where I had already learned something that I could now apply. And also, the other thing for the executive search is that I love people. And when you love people, you have a lot of curiosity about what makes them who they are.
Sure.
So I think the fact that I could dig in and be curious and want to know more, like if somebody answered a question, I'd use that question to bridge into, well, tell me more about that.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think just sometimes being a little bit naive can be an actual advantage because you're not arrogant. You just, you're really able to.
Absolutely. There's no substitute for genuine humility, curiosity, and enthusiasm.
And also vulnerability. I think, you want to be very confident. You always, in everything that you do in life, you want to express your willingness to learn, but you're also confident where you have already learned. But then where you don't, you're not afraid to show your vulnerability.
It's a great phrase we don't use enough. I don't know.
Yeah.
Tell me.
I don't know.
I don't know. I'd love to know more. Please tell me. Yeah.
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 Exactly.
Okay, so you spent 20 years in the corporate world.
That was where I broke in.
And you wanted, at some point, to branch out on your own.
What happened was I was with this this wonderful company, Ward Howell, and then they were in the city. We were in the, as I mentioned to you earlier, we were in the 101 California building, and we had, the high rise, all the perks, right? Yeah. And so there was some entrepreneurial push that said to me, go to Marin County and start your own. So I started my own company for about, I think 4 or 5 years. I was on my own as an independent consultant. And at one time I had 19 different searches going. So I had to hire a whole staff and it really grew. And I actually had an incredibly successful run. But then, as often happens, you come to the end of, I always say, I've climbed that mountain, I look out at the horizon, and I say, okay, what's next? And guess what? You know what I found out recently? Genetically, I did my genetics testing. Genetically, I have the gene that for dopamine, which is the feel-good hormone, neurotransmitter, that is entrepreneurially oriented, where you accomplish something and you say, okay, I did that, now what?
Now what? You have
and
the
so
now
you
what
don't
dopamine
have
gene.
the now what. So you don't have that dopamine hit that lasts for years, that you ride your horse on that and you never do anything else. I'm the one that says, okay, I did that, now what's next?
Could have been a stockbroker. You could be a degenerate gambler. Fortunately, you're not.
And remember Ernest Arbuckle, when he's one of the early pioneers in the Bay Area. He was at Ford Motor Company. Then he came and became the CEO of Wells Fargo, and then he went to Stanford as the chancellor or something. But he once said, and I never forgot it, I try to repot myself every 5 years.
Oh, that's good.
And so I learned, by doing, I learned that lesson.
Well, it's interesting because what you're doing now, it sounds, what I've heard so far is it's a lot of like growing companies looking for that next achievement. But what we're going to pivot to Ageless, Timeless.
Okay. Yeah.
That seems a bit more altruistic. You're not necessarily looking for that next benchmark for yourself. You're like, okay, how can I now help other people hit their own benchmarks? So what made that
happened?
Pivot?
Well, when you go through a career, like, okay, so I was with, Ward Howell, I had my own firm, then we forgot about the real estate development. That's the most important part of my career. So let me backtrack on that. So what happened was I went up to Aspen for a retreat. And while I was there, this is all serendipitous, no plan. So I can't be the example for you to parade in front of your audience of this woman really planned her career, because it didn't happen that way. But lucky accidents. I always say, if you're ready for something, the readiness principle, if you're ready for something and you're receptive, your mind is open, your heart is open, things will come to you, because we are all energetic beings. So when you magnetize a certain amount of, I'm looking for something new to do, well, that's what happened. So I went up there, I met this person who said, hey, Aspen's having a little bit of a downturn. We haven't had ever in real estate, and now this is a time to buy something. Well, I had some resources that I could invest, and so I did that, and that began a career where my last client was Starbucks, if you believe it. I to this moment I can still say I wish when I called them to tell them I was leaving to go into real estate that I had asked for some equity. Right. Anyway, I wasn't that smart. But and just one more thing about the world of what I did with the executive search is that because I was doing the venture capital backed companies, I learned about entrepreneurial taking risks and how to fund companies and how these CEOs were doing their dog and pony shows with the investors and all that. So I had a lot of training vicariously, really. I didn't have to do it, but I was learning how to do it through others. Yeah. And because I was looking often for the CEOs of those companies or the top VPs of whatever, I learned a lot about what they needed to find in their key executives. So I just want to say everything is a building block. And I didn't know all this at the time because I didn't have a plan. I just knew that I was, having fun and challenge. So I went to Aspen, and I did my first job, my first real estate investment. Let my executive search business go, and my husband was really spooked out by that.
Yeah.
Because he was used to me bringing in a very secure income. And all of a sudden I'm telling him, I'm going to now give up all of that income. And he and I were pretty equal about, our partnership. We never had any issues about male, female. It was always, we're equal partners. And if you make more money than I do this year, that's great. It's all part of the big kitty, right? So I can remember sitting in our living room one night and saying, hey, you know what? I just made X amount of money this year. And it was more than he had earned in his legal career. And he said, fantastic. He was so happy for me. So that's the kind of, that was another good building block, is having a spouse that was supportive. Yeah. So anyway, that's how it happened. So then I started investing in real estate with no background, and I had to go out and raise money because I did everything from the moment I found a property to funding it with usually it was a bank loan, to hiring the architects and the builder, and then building the home, and then finding the real estate agent and then selling it. So we were vertically integrated. And I did 6 big homes in Aspen. And I have to say, that's a place to cut your teeth. It's like you're going right to the top. Because one, there's a lot of very discerning people with a lot of money, and the real estate is very expensive. And it always was, even during this little blip they had. And I was lucky enough to continue to buy something, sell it, make more money, reinvest. I always said, reinvest only what you made as a profit, but keep the core investment that you made. Play with the house money. Good point. So that's the real estate. So that went on for 20.
And you went multiple places. You didn't just only focus.
Aspen was my first, but then I ended up in Hawaii. I bought 7,000 acres.
Oh my gosh!
Hardly, what you would expect of someone who was a newbie, but it just turned out. I had done 6 homes in Aspen. I did about 6 homes in Hawaii, and then the 7,000 acre. Which was a former sugar plantation.
That's ambitious.
Yeah, it was called Kealia. It's on the island of Kauai. A lot of people know it. It's called an ahupua'a, which means from the mountain to the sea, which was a land division that was given by the former kings to the alii, who were the nobility, to keep them loyal to the king. And it was a land division that was economically sufficient, where the mountain people could trade with the ocean people. So they had pineapples, they had cattle, they had sugar, of course. But the unfortunate thing, the AmFac, the company that owned it, they had acquired a lot of sugar, and sugar was going downhill in Hawaii at this time. This is around 2000. So we were lucky enough to get this project when AmFac was in trouble and needed to sell. Along with us, we had Bette Midler bought from them. And so everybody was buying pieces of land from AmFac, and we got 6,700 acres. And we were lucky enough that we got the biggest piece at the time. And then we started to do all the stuff you have to do, subdivide it. Then we had to go for permits and get the infrastructure. And I would have to say that's probably the biggest learning experience. When you have to go, first you have to raise the money.
Sure. So I'm thinking about your trajectory, where you're heading.
Sorry, I forgot to answer your
No, it's okay.
I'll get to that.
No, I'll go back there, because it is interesting to me that you've chosen these very ambitious things that, you are not afraid to come in as a novice.
Right.
You have no fear of not knowing as much as everyone else in the room, and letting your natural curiosity be the thing that floats you through until you do know enough to be within the top ranks and understand it.
When I was teaching, there was an author named Bruner, and he basically taught the principle to learn by doing. And I took that to heart very early on in my life. And I said, I don't know how to play tennis, for example. I went out and I watched really good tennis players. I never actually took a tennis lesson, but I actually became maybe a low A player, but more like a B plus. But I learned it really to become a good tennis player only by imitating. So I found that in real estate too. If I went out to some of the best developments, where the real quality existed, and the hotels, even though I wasn't doing commercial, I still learned a lot about aesthetics from visiting five-star hotel. So again, imitation is the best form of flattery. So I wasn't proud. I always felt like there were others that were much better doing what I was doing, and I was just a little new kid on the block. And so why not open that, that whatever you call your learning curve,
right?
Just open it up and allow all that knowledge to be absorbed. So that's what happened in both, even in teaching. I mean, I had never been a teacher. So you learn it by getting up in front of a classroom. And if you don't see the kids falling asleep, you might be doing something right,
The advantage of beginner mind.
Yeah.
So that pivot. Let's go to that pivot. How do you get there? Because you're, at this point, I'm just doing some math.
Yeah.
You came to the Bay Area in your 20s. You did corporate stuff for 20 years, and then 20 years worth of real estate development, and then you said, okay.
Okay, so here's what happened. They say adversity can be your opportunity, and actually challenge can create even more opportunity. So I faced the biggest challenge of my life in business as a real estate developer in 2008, when everybody, knows that those were the years that a lot of people had a reckoning. But in real estate, particularly when you were in the resort world, meaning, fortunately I had sold most of Aspen by then, but I had, Hawaii was a resort location. It was second homes. And that's changed a lot. It's become much more of a primary location since then. But when I was 2008, it was a second home. So if things were not going well on the mainland, forget about people buying, anything else. They were trying to get rid of property, not buy new ones. So I had some really big properties, multi-million-dollar homes. And there I was with all this properties, a lot of debt. And fortunately, I had sold the 7,000. Well, I sold the 7,000 in pieces, but by 2008, I was pretty much able to, have gotten out of the big one. So I didn't have that to worry about. But I had a lot of other, big homes, and I owned 40 acres on Secret Beach, which is in Kilauea, which is there are two main primary locations in Kauai for homes, for high quality luxury homes. And one is in Veki Road in Hanalei, and the other one is Kaupeia Road in Kilauea. And both of them are right on the beach or above the beach. So I was lucky enough to have, I had 4 properties on Secret Beach. Now, in the good time, they would have sold probably, in their own way, they would have sold for probably around 24, 25 million. And we had to let them go for about 11. But we paid every bank back. But, this was a time when I had to regroup and say, okay, so this is just one of many that I owned, but I had to do the same thing on several other properties. And I managed to get rid of everything. I managed to pay every bank back. I managed to keep my reputation where any of those banks would let me borrow from them again. And in fact, I was even more of a heroine because all these other developers were walking away. So I had something to be really, wave a flag over, even though I wasn't doing it because I was suffering by, like, what do I do next? How do I get out of this? And, it certainly hurts to build something with your heart in it, heart and soul, and then watch it. And it seemed like 11 million is a lot of money, but it just sold again for 37 million, the same property.
Yeah, it's all a lot of money.
So it's all timing. Yeah, but that 11 million, most of it paid back the banks.
Sure.
So in order to do what you had to do to create these huge development opportunities, you had to leverage. So even though we did very well on the 7,000 acres, we reinvested everything. If we hadn't reinvested, if we had just taken the money and put it in a bank, we wouldn't have gone through 2008 the way a lot of developers
But that dopamine hit would not have come if you'd not rolled the dice.
So the good news, like I said, everything happens for a reason. Well, I didn't say that, but I said that, adversity and challenge and opportunity can all be synonyms. The Chinese word for opportunity apparently is the similar to adversity. So they know something that maybe we Americans are not aware of, which is, learn from your experience, learn from your past, learn from your experiences, and use it to build your future. And don't make the same mistake twice, right? Once burned, twice shy. But anyway, so I was in a place where I was downsized now, and I was always a person who had more on her plate than she ever needed. So it was like, okay, what do I do now? And my girlfriend said, oh, why don't you start a podcast? And I didn't even know what a podcast was, because this was back in like 2008, 9, 10. Podcasts really hadn't started until probably 2014. So I got in 2019 because I was still doing my real estate to try to settle up a lot of stuff. But anyway, I ended up, she said, why don't you do it on online dating? And I said, no, thank you. My husband had just passed away, and it was the first time in my life I had ever been single.
How long had you been married?
We were married, well, we met when we were 14.
Wow.
So we had been together 8 years before we got married. Then we got married right out of college, and then we were married for like 40 plus years. So yeah, I never had a single life. In fact, that was the one thing my parents always said, why are you not dating before you get married? Don't you want to be sure that this is the right man? But
seems like
they
you were
couldn't
sure.
persuade me differently that this was the right man.
Before you keep up, what was that like for you after he passed? Had he been ill?
That's a really good question. I'm a fighter, and I'm very resilient. I obviously fought through 2008. But this was a challenge because this was a man that I had grown up with. He was my best friend in the world. And in the end, the last 4 or 5 years, he was having a lot more problems with the downturn. And so he had gone through, never been sick a day in his life. He was the captain of the Harvard football team. He was a big athlete locally here. He was an A player in the tennis at TPC. So this man had never had health issues. All of a sudden, he had a heart attack, and then he had a stent, and he managed to live the next 5 or 6 years. And then he had Parkinson's, which nothing in his DNA, nothing in his family, but he had been a football player, and he had several, he had knees and other things that could have caused him to get nerve damage. We never, went after that, but anyway, yeah. So after he passed, it was an adjustment to not have a person you could talk to at night. Like you come home and you would, have somebody, or call up where if we were traveling or at a distance from each other for whatever reason. And that, I think that was probably one of the biggest adjustments of all, is not having someone that you really knew you and loved you unconditionally, and no matter where you were, you could be there for each other. And he, by the way, was one of the nicest human beings you could ever imagine. How lucky am I that at 14, I would meet somebody that you don't know what love is. At that point, it's puppy love. And that would turn out to be such a model human being. And, he had wonderful parents. I think that might have been a big part of it. What an upbringing, and they were New England, tough, but very soft at the same time, if you know what I'm saying. They had a lot of feeling for humanity. And he grew up with that, even though he was a football player. He played other sports too, but football was the main one. And, so he had to be tough and resilient, but what a gentle human. I always said he was an angel brought down by God. So I was really lucky that way.
That's tremendously lucky. I mean, and I'm sorry for your loss. I mean,
yeah,
it's still there with you. Did his struggles with health inspire where you are now?
It really didn't. But today I know that if I had known then what I know now, I probably could have saved his life.
Really?
Because there's so much more knowledge with stem cells and DNA methylation and peptides and so many things that are addressing Parkinson's. But he it had more of the allopathic approach where they were giving him pharmaceutical drugs, and I think one thing built on another, right. And
So talk to me about Ageless Timeless.
So anyway,
How'd you get there?
To get back to that moment where she said, well, what are you passionate about? And I said, well, that takes a nanosecond to tell you, and that's wellness. I said, ever since I was 20, in my early 20s, I've been passionate about knowing more about how to take care of yourself. I don't know why God brought this awareness to me, except that I did have a health scare when I was 26 where, I won't dwell on it, but, I should dwell on it because it is actually a building block of my life. I was told by a local doctor here that I had lupus and that I was probably not going to make it. And he had no bedside manner.
Probably not going to make it. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, because lupus wasn't always a deadly disease, but there were a lot of people who did, I guess have terminal. But he wasn't very kind, and and he told me this on the phone. And so my husband wasn't around at that time. He was in the meetings in the city, and my mother-in-law showed up at my house, and I was like completely broken up, and so she took care of getting me settled down to realize that this was just one person saying it. So I learned never to just take what somebody says and use that as the almighty truth, that you have to fight and learn the facts and fight reality, fight whatever might be your reality. Well, I learned over the next few years that I did not ever have lupus, that I did have a low platelet count, which they contribute to an autoimmune condition. But platelets are, what causes your blood to coagulate, and you can live with that. Even though they wanted to take out my spleen and all that stuff. So I was guided, honestly, Andrew. I don't know where I sometimes feel these angels around me, but I was guided not to do the surgery, not to believe the doctor who gave me the terminal diagnosis. But then it led me down a path of learning to take care of myself, to find answers for that might not be the conventional knowledge. And at that time, this is now 26. So, I was just a kid still. I didn't have the base of knowledge I have today, but I knew that there was more out there to learn. So I went and found a doctor who told me that you don't have lupus. I don't know what they've been trying to tell you. And he put me on a path of more preventative medicine. And so I learned that now I got into Adele Davis and that Pizzorno, the man from Baxter University. And, I started reading and being curious. This is, again, learned by doing. So I learned that there are other ways to cure your conditions without taking pharmaceutical drugs, without having surgery, if you don't need it, without taking an antibiotic, if you can get away with it, these kinds of things. So that's where the grounding began. Well, fast forward, when I'm sitting there with my friend, and by the way, I started going to health food stores when they were just these little mom and pops, And then, of course, we got Whole Foods and we got, all the bigger stores as we got older. But early on, they were just little mom. I don't know if you've been here this long, but I think in the 90s, were you here in the 90s? Okay. So there was this little store in Mill Valley that was like a little, it was like the precursor to the one Good Earth. And actually Good Earth used to be there. And so you go today, it's a real grocery store. But then they were just these little hippie stores. But I was early on going to those stores and buying organic and learning about supplements and asking a lot of questions, reading a lot of books. And so when she asked me that question, I said, there's no, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 plus years now, that it's ingrained in me. So that's how Ageless, so the other reason that it's called Ageless and Timeless, or the reason, is that people used to say, oh, Michele, you look so good. Why are you, doing something that's about aging? And I'd say, no, I'm ageless and timeless. Or they'd rudely ask you, how old are you? And I'd say, no, I don't talk about my age, my chronological age, but I will talk about being ageless and timeless, which means living your life as if you don't have a chronological age. You've gone around the sun, but your age is really, how do you feel?
Right.
That's your biological age. Your biological age is really more important than your chronological age.
Right.
I really want people to understand that. If somebody asks you, how old are you, just say, are you asking me my biological or my chronological? Because my chronological doesn't really tell you how old I am or how young I am. So biological is the health of your organs, the health of your cells, which is really where aging begins and ends. And so I would say that knowing that you can be ageless and timeless. And there's even a group now called RADFest, which is they having their convention, I think, coming up this month or very soon. And they have a director named James Stroll, who was on my podcast, and they believe that you can live forever. Now, I'm not quite at that point, but I am, with what just happened with David Sinclair, where he got approval to do an actual pill, an injection, that is going to hopefully cure glaucoma. And it's one of the first that's supposed to set back aging in at least that organ. So that's just the beginning. In fact, I think Peter Diamandis, who's a big, longevity expert, he said, don't die in the next 10 years, because the next 10 years are going to be the most important in lifespan.
You see me chuckling a little bit. So I work a lot around older adults.
People
and
that's why
65
this is so
and older.
important.
Yeah, and I talk to a lot of people who are, they're very aware of their mortality. They're facing challenges. They're, from anything from Parkinson's to spinal fluid on the brain.
Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's, various challenges to the physical health. And, there's like a certain amount of relief, not relief, but just an acceptance in the fact that, my life has been this thing that I'm very privileged to have lived, and I'm facing this moment that's coming for me, and I'm going to do it with dignity, and there's like a bit of grace that comes with that, not being ageless, but being aged, and I've lived this thing. I've got this wisdom. This was hard earned, but still open and curious. How do you square that circle? Because I imagine you get that critique. Like, what about?
I don't have a lot of really elderly people that are a part of our audience. There are more people that are getting to that age where they're aware that that things are changing. Okay, so, and now they say, you should be tested for Alzheimer's when you're in your 40s, even in your 20s, because it's already starting 20 years earlier. So I didn't mean to segue there, but to say that a lot of the people that are listening or watching Ageless and Timeless are looking for answers to prevent the very thing that you were talking about. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't be inspirational to people who are facing chronic illness and don't feel that they have the time left or the answers to extend that time. I always think you can. I mean, I'm a diehard optimist, and I always think, don't ever accept that something is the end all and be all. Just always be a fighter, always be a warrior, and that means that you shouldn't give up. So my mantra is never give up. Now that may be a little unrealistic because I am, probably an exception in that I do a lot of workouts. I'm very healthy. I'm very energetic. I, have a lot of testing done now that I've been with Ageless and Timeless, and there is a lot of good news.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I don't see signs of aging. Like recently, I did a DEXA scan, and I saw now the first time that I am showing a little bit of bone loss. So now I have to focus. So, okay, there's a good example. So you say, okay, I have maybe early dementia, or I have been given the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. Well, Alzheimer's can be reversed. I mean, they've spent billions of dollars in coming up with pharmaceutical drugs that don't do anything, that haven't reversed it. But there are lifestyle ways now that, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Dale Bredesen, but he lives here in Nevada. He's been a guest on my podcast. He's written the book called The End of Alzheimer's. And he made the bold statement that this generation of people where they have either Alzheimer's or they have the early stages they don't need to accept that as a death sentence, that there can be a reversal. And he feels that people who start early to look for the answers, whether it's going for their genetics test and seeing whether they have the APO4 allele, which is the genetics test for Alzheimer's. If you have it, it doesn't mean you're going to get Alzheimer's. It just means you're more likely, you have to be more, just diligent about. So anyway, he's basically saying if people would just look more to the lifestyle side, the 5 pillars, the nutrition, the exercise, the sleep, the stress, and the commitment to community, those kinds of things where they have in the blue zones, which, are very well documented. These people live healthfully to be centenarians because they practice those kinds of lifestyle, and particularly love of community and love of others and family connection. That one doesn't get played enough.
Right. Yeah.
But,
well, and it seems like you're trying to build a bit of a community of people online, at least, if not locally as well, but that are focused on that are hopeful and trying,
And turning people around who have lost hope.
Right.
That's the big one. So I didn't tell you this, but I have just recently, and will be evolving over more and more to helping people exactly as you just described, through a new company that is being started by Dr. Robert Goldman, who is the co-founder of the American Academy of Anti-Aging, which is the granddaddy of all the anti-aging conferences. The one they had last December in Vegas had over 100,000 feet of exhibition space, and I think 100,000 or 10,000 people attended. So it's become the Cadillac. But anyway, he co-founded that about 25 years ago. And so he's now starting this new company called Longevity Masters Global. And his right-hand person who's been with him for 30 years, Rob Fletcher, is the head of business of marketing, or he's the president actually. But he asked me to be the head of business development. So the three of us are starting this, and we're putting together an advisory board of the most pristine minds and reputations of people in the industry, in the longevity space. And so I've invited maybe 5 or 6, and so far everybody's accepted. So we will be it'll be a platform, and we will be reaching out to people just like you described, but also the whole spectrum of people. And it will be information through podcasts, through newsletters, through webinars, blogs, and all kinds of the media type of ways to communicate to help people who need answers. And by the way, I also write for Top Doctor magazine.
That's right.
I write a monthly column, and that's another avenue through traditional copy magazine, but they also have a digital. So all these things will add up to me doing what you said earlier, which is finding my way to helping others. Because Ageless and Timeless, I started it as a philanthropic. I mean, it was me trying to find a way to help others.
Yeah. What's next? That thing. How do you continue to be useful?
And that's been building on itself. Top Doctor,
right.
And now Longevity Master. So who knows what's next?
Who knows what's next?
Yeah.
Well, what I want to know, I'm asking for a friend. If someone happened to be a 47-year-old guy, trying to live well, I'm less concerned with how long I live, but just how well I live.
That's a whole new thing.
My wife takes care of people for a living. She's a nurse. I don't want her to have to take care of me.
Right.
What would you recommend that person, that hypothetical 47-year-old man?
Well, okay, so that's you. So lifespan and health span, these are the hot new terms. So what is life? Lifespan is the amount of years you live. Health span is how well you live those years. So like Eric Verdon, who's the CEO of the Buck Center, he said, he was on my podcast, and he said it in a number of speeches. Every time I'm in an audience and I ask the people, how long do you want to live to 100? And nobody raises their hand. And then he said, do you want to live to 100 if you can live as if you were 45 or 47? And everybody raises their hand. So this is what the new thing is. It's all about health. So what is health span? Well, health span is understanding those 5 pillars that we just talked about. So nutrition is so important. Knowing that what you put in your body, and by the way, I have to start by saying we live in one of the most toxic worlds that could ever be imagined. Our great-grandparents had it so much easier. They didn't live as long chronologically because there wasn't as much medical awareness, but they lived those years more healthfully because they had food that wasn't completely tainted with glyphosate and other toxic pesticides and so forth. So take that as the backdrop, that we're fighting like the myth of Sisyphus, where you've got the boulder and you're fighting an uphill, but you keep managing to fight back. So nutrition, so knowing that you can buy organic, the best place to buy is in the farmers markets because you're getting it right from the farmer to you. It doesn't go through a distribution center. It's not sitting on a shelf. Even if it is organic at Whole Foods, it's still been sitting around for a while before it gets to you. So, I like to buy the things that aren't in plastic because now they're showing that microplastics are, But now I'm finding out that the things that are not in plastic are being sprayed with Clorox or chlorine. So we've got to always ask questions. But the safest is to go to an organic farmer.
So nutrition.
Yeah, so nutrition. So the next, of course, is exercise. So you and I were talking about that earlier, how important it is to have some activity every single day. Even if you only walk 10 minutes after a meal, just to work it off a little bit. Next is sleep. I can't emphasize enough the importance of sleep.
It's the best thing.
And there are some supplements that help if people have trouble with stress and anxiety, because that's a big problem in today's world, particularly in this divisive world that we live in. So sleep, and that means try to get at least 8 hours, 7 or 8 hours of good delta sleep. delta. I mean, you won't sleep that deep for 8 hours, but get part of your sleep going into delta, which is, or that they call sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Sure.
Sympathetic is the fight or flight. That's where your cortisol is really high, and you're under a lot of stress, and you're always thinking and overthinking and problem solving, and you never relax. Parasympathetic is where you go into that state of rest and relax. That's where you want to be.
Nutrition,
and the next one,
exercise, sleep.
yeah. And then, stress is the one I sort of bridge there. And then finally, the one I mentioned earlier, which is community.
Yeah.
And having loving relationships. They say the people on their deathbed that, have their last words of regret, that one of the biggest, the most relevant and prevalent regret that they have is not having had the love in their life, or having had at least at the end of their years. So that's important, to keep surrounding yourself. And I put in that category activity. So creating things like Ageless and Timeless, where you're doing things that are fruitful and you feel good about it, and it gives you purpose in life. So along with connection is purpose.
Yeah. So how do people find you?
Well, I have a website. It's called agelessandtimeless.com. I also have a YouTube channel that if you just write in Ageless and Timeless with Michele Hughes, or just Ageless and Timeless, gets you right there. And we've been doing it for 8 years, so there's a lot of podcasts to listen to.
There's a lot out there.
But I would say to people, you can pick and choose the people like for the brain, for Alzheimer's, I would go and listen to Dr. Patrick Porter, who founded the company called BrainTap. Or I would listen to Dale Bredesen, who's the one I mentioned earlier, who wrote the book on ending Alzheimer's. And there's many, many more. I mean, I have others on my list I want to invite, like David Perlmutter, who's, the brain,
I'm just impressed at
Daniel
how many
Amen.
doctors' names you remember. That alone is impressive.
Well, if you look at my list of guests, you're going to be amazed.
It's substantial, yeah.
So that's the one thing I guess I'm most proud of.
Ageless and Timeless on YouTube.
Yeah,
You're on Spotify,
and then Top
Apple.
Doctor Magazine, there's that. And then, of course, now this Longevity Masters will be coming online. So, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of places to find find the and I'm only telling, don't go look for me, look for the information.
I know you're very, I can tell that it's more about the information and about the people who know. You're continuing to express that creativity and curiosity and humility that it seemed like it benefited you in your career.
Andy, what I said in the beginning is I thought I was going to get so much learning just by being the host and asking the questions. But it turns out it's very interactive.
Yes.
And so you always want to build on and also in order to be a good host, as you know, it's important to understand your audience and know what they want, and know what questions to ask, and also what reading you need to do to be better equipped to be the host.
Well, I hope I can learn more from you as we go along.
Yeah, so we're going to have fun together.
Yeah. Well, Michele, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.